Rule 8 is about creating a multi-dimensional strategy. Now, strategy refers to the kind of overarching plan that you have. It's not the specific actions you take. A strategy is not to go into a meeting with Mayor William Donald Schaefer. That's a tactic. That's how you pursue a strategy. Strategy is the big blueprint. I also like to think about it as kind of a hypothesis. If we do this, and this, and we combine them in a certain way, we're going to be able to transform the way people talk about politics, the way people act in politics, and the results that we get. Strategy is the big picture guide. It's the North Star that helps you get from one place to another. I like to think of strategy as having 4 key elements. And if you have all 4 of them, and if you combine a bunch of tactics using these 4 elements, these 4 dimensions of strategy, chances are you're going to be successful. You're at least going to make movement forward. And the 4 dimensions are time, space, force, and mind. And I think they're self-explanatory, but I'll say a word or two about each. Time is simply, where does it happen? What is the duration of it? Are you going for a quick knockout, or are you going for a long-term trench warfare where you develop power over time, slowly, methodically, patiently? And it also has to do with the timing of specific actions that you take. When do you strike? What's the best moment? What's the most propitious moment for confronting William Donald Schaefer? There's a good time for doing it and a bad time for doing it. There's an effective time and an ineffective time. So that's time. Space. What is your arena? Are you going to be focusing on a small neighborhood? Are you going to be focusing on the row houses on 37th Street in Baltimore, Maryland? Or are you going to talk about the whole neighborhood? Or are you going to talk about that whole section of Baltimore that goes from Johns Hopkins University to Lake Montebello? Or are you going to talk about the whole city? Or are you going to talk about the whole county? Or the whole state or beyond, right? What's the scope of conflict? What's the geographic scope? That makes a big difference, because the key thing for any kind of political activity is to find the pressure points. If you go too big, you're going to diffuse whatever power you have. If you go too small, then you lose the ability to have a big impact right away. So you have to force. How do you confront people? Do you confront people to persuade them, or to block them, or to take away their authority, or to embarrass them, or to prevent them from doing something, or what? So how much force do you want to get? Are you going to be polite, or are you going to be not so polite? Are you going to be Martin Luther King at the March on Washington, giving a beautiful speech that rallies people and that presents the best image of the movement to the nation as a whole? Or are you going to be the Martin Luther King of Birmingham, where the whole point was to instigate conflict so that the rest of America saw on the evening news that night policemen with cattle prods and fire hoses knocking down teenage girls and boys as they're trying to speak up for their own rights? King himself was not violent, but he knew that his actions, the team's actions, would provoke violence. So there's another question of force there. And then mind. How do you persuade people? How do you get people to think? Ultimately, people act depending on how they think the world works and what they can do and what they can't do. Time, space, force, mind. So I wanted to illustrate this. I want to talk about one of the all-time great movements in American history, which is the organizing of the United Farm Workers by Cesar Chavez in the 50s and 60s, and actually into the 70s as well. In the early 1960s, organizing the farm workers in the Central Valley of California was a disaster. Not only was Chavez trying to organize unions to bargain for wages for the pickers, other unions were competing. There was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of dislike among these competing unions, and so they constantly undermined each other. Not only that, even if they had worked together, which they eventually did, what they could do was really limited. When workers signed up to be part of a union, they were fired and replaced by braceros. Or when companies agreed to bargain, they would go out of business and then they would reappear under a different corporate name. So they would dissolve their company, and then a new company would come in, and so whatever progress had been made disappears instantly. And of course, workers who were involved in organizing were terrorized. They were kicked out of their homes. They lost their jobs. Their families were in danger. Organizing has never been easy in America. The US has a long history of repression of organized labor. So what are they going to do? Well, there's this guy named Jerry Brown, not the Jerry Brown you're thinking of, a graduate student at Cornell University. And Jerry Brown had an idea. He said, look, we keep losing these local skirmishes. We can't win them. Even when we win them, we lose them. So let's change the scope of the battle. Let's make the battle national and even international. Cesar Chavez says, okay, how do you suppose we're going to do that? Boycott grapes. Across the world, boycott grapes. This takes the battle from these small little communities where even when you win, you turn around and you lose. And it expands it to every shopping market in the country. If you can get consumers to not buy grapes, the grape growers will come under incredible pressure and they will have to accede to the demands of the pickers. Not only that, they'll have to do it across the board so that you don't have one farm that's unionized and then 2, 3, 4 more that are ununionized. And you're not having the workers fighting against each other. Everybody is on the same plane. So they radically expanded the scope of the conflict. They changed place, time, space, force, mind. They changed the space. And then they also changed the time, because when you do these localized conflicts, it only really works for a certain part of the year. So there's about 2 or 3 months when the workers have their only leverage. And then besides that, the other 8, 9 months of the year, they have no leverage whatsoever. And so there's a huge dead space between organizing efforts. And so this makes it year-round, it makes it national and even international. The boycott moved to Canada and then it moved to Europe. It also changed the mind part of it, because all of a sudden, middle-class people who go to the grocery store to buy a bunch of grapes are suddenly aware of something that they weren't aware of before. They can't quite picture it, but they know that there's a righteous cause that they could never take part in. They could never play a constructive role if it was confined to the little communities of Central Valley in California. And so it became a big deal. Actually, it was one of the first political movements I learned about when I was a kid growing up in the 1970s. And it transformed the whole movement. It gave it a national and even an international constituency. Robert Kennedy became very close to Cesar Chavez, and he became a big supporter of it. He held the hearings, Senate hearings, out in California, which brought more media attention to the issue. And so it dramatically transformed it in that way. And then also with regard to mind, the United Farm Workers were an amazing group in cultural ways as well. They had a theater, they had musical groups, and they were also highly spiritual. Cesar Chavez, when they did a march to the state capitol in Sacramento, he didn't call it a march, he called it a pilgrimage. And he organized it for the Easter season so that they would arrive in Sacramento on Easter Sunday. And they carried crosses, and they quoted scripture, and they made the argument a deep moral argument, which trumped in many ways the kind of dollars and cents arguments most prominent in the whole issue for so many years. So time, space, force, mind. Force, the boycott itself is one of the ultimate kinds of force. It's taking something away from somebody else. It's saying, we're not asking you, we're going to force you to deal with us. We're going to coerce you to deal with us. What you're doing is you're influencing people, you're giving them information about what happens to their consumer dollars. And do you wish to use your consumer dollars to support an exploitive industry, or do you wish to support the workers who are keeping America fed? So the United Farm Workers transformed when they changed their strategy, changing how they thought of time, space, force, and mind. The result was that the union was not only recognized across the board and not only realized historic pay increases and benefits, but it led to a California state law for labor protections that became a national model. As you might know, farm workers are excluded from American labor laws. And so labor unions don't have what meager protections there are, and they don't have a process at all for organizing labor unions. And so this movement, this decision to go national, to go big, by changing time, space, force, and mind in the strategy, transformed the movement, and in many ways, the impact of this goes far beyond the grape workers themselves.